guys, so I'm here today to do my mid-month reading wrap-up for the month of December. It is halfway through the month. I've already read 6 books, so I wanted to share with you my thoughts on all 6 of those books before the month is over, so like I've mentioned in mid-month wrap-ups before, I can give you more in-depth reviews of each one. So without further ado, let's get into the books. I'll start with the 3 I have physical copies of, and the first one I borrowed from the library. I need to return now because I've finished it obviously, and that is Goldie Vance Volume 1. This is a comic book series, first volume of the comic book series in trade paperback, and I'm not sure what age range this would fall in. It doesn't feel particularly like adult or mature in any of its themes or plot lines or language, if that's the kind of thing that bothers you. I would say this kind of is one of those comic book series that can appeal to all ages really. I first heard about this one over on Kathy's channel, who I'll link down below, and she just made it sound like a lot of good fun, and it has queer rep in it. What I've come across so far is that the main character is attracted to other women, and she's also a woman or a teenage girl. I don't know if there's more varied queer rep as the series goes on, but that's certainly there, and you know, up front and centre as in the protagonist's life. So I really enjoyed that about that, because I think that's something that is lacking from a lot of popular comic book series. It also generally has quite a diverse cast of characters, which is nice to see, and I enjoyed this. I certainly didn't love it. It follows our protagonist, Goldie Vance, whose father manages a hotel that's part of a larger chain of hotels, and she is one of the valets at this hotel, and she also wants to be a bit of like a detective and a private investigator, so she's sort of like dabbling that, trying to help out their local PI, even if she's not wanted, and trying to figure out small and big crimes. And a big crime takes place, and she's trying to figure out where some missing jewels have disappeared to at the beginning of the trade paperback. If you love those kind of traditional PI tales, I think you'll like this. I think if you like things like Veronica Mars, you probably like this, although it's not quite as gritty as Veronica Mars, because like I said, it's slightly like more all ages than Veronica Mars is. But overall, yeah, like I said, I enjoyed but did not love. I'm going to continue on with the series, but I think for various reasons it just didn't like really pack a punch. It was a little bit forgettable for me, and although I enjoyed the queer rep, I didn't think the storyline was that phenomenal, or the mystery that phenomenal. But I liked the characters, and I thought the artwork was fun. It's quite like cutesy, which I liked, and I'm definitely willing to see kind of where this series goes, and if I enjoy it more as it goes on. And I'd say this first one was like a solid 3 stars for me. A lot of potential, but didn't quite like make it into my favourite comic book series. A book that I enjoyed slightly more is Girls of Paper and Fire by Natasha Gann. I have mentioned this a lot recently because it featured heavily in my reading vlog from the Queer Lit readathon, so you've probably heard me talk about it a little bit here, but I'm going to give you a proper review now. As you can already guess, it is a queer story. It's a fantasy novel, a young adult fantasy novel with very dark themes. This one in particular deals heavily with sexual assault, sexual violence, sexual slavery, and is set in a magical empire where there's 3 different castes of people that make up the different classes, and our main character is from the lowest class, and this year she has been chosen as one of 8 girls who are called Paper Girls to serve as the king's consorts. So she is, like I said, essentially a sex slave to him, whether she wants to or not, and some of the girls that have been chosen are more like interested in fulfilling that role than others, although generally speaking it's a sort of like making the most of a really crap situation, even if they are flattered by it, because like I said, there's absolutely no choice involved, and once that's been taken away, it can never be like a fair or equal relationship. And it is dark, like I mentioned. It really very much deals with those themes, although I think it deals with those themes very well. I think it's making a conscious effort to explore sexual violence and male-female relationships and the patriarchy, and I think that's incredibly well done. And amidst all of that, there is a romance that blossoms between our protagonist, who's one of the paper girls, and another young woman at the king's court, which is forbidden. First of all, she can't have a relationship with anybody because she's the king's consort, but she also isn't supposed to have a relationship with another woman, and it's about their blossoming romance, and that is like this shining beacon of light amidst the darkness of this book. And I thought the queer relationship was explored so well. I think it developed nice and slowly. It felt very honest and authentic, and I just thought it was done and handled so well. I think that was really like the bit that stood out to me from this book, because when you start reading it, there are quite a few like young adult fantasy tropes in it. It certainly doesn't leave behind all of those tropes that you might expect from the beginning of a fantasy novel. Not that those are all bad things, but you worry when you start a book like that it's going to end up predictable and samey. But although it uses tropes that you'll see in other young adult fantasy novels, it makes the whole world its own, and it makes the story its own, and is a testament to the author's like creativity and writing, because I just loved the story and the romance in this, and it's the first in a series. I can't wait to see how things develop in the sequel. And lastly, for physical books, I read The Black Unicorn poems by Audrey Lorde. Audrey Lorde it was a poet that lived in the 20th century. She passed away in the 90s, and she was like a civil rights activist. She was an academic, she was a lesbian, she was black, she was a feminist, and she explores all of those themes in her poetry. She's also written non-fiction, which I've read before, and I have to say I think I'm more of a fan of her non-fiction. I personally take more from her non-fiction. That's not because her poetry isn't very good. It is, it's just not necessarily my style of poetry. It's more abstract and like surreal and flowery than I perhaps like my poetry, but I think it would be to a lot of people's taste, and there were a few poems in here in particular that I really enjoyed. In particular, there was one written to Asata when Asata was in prison. Asata Shakur was her autobiography over here. Asata Shakur was like framed basically for a crime because she was a like civil rights activist in the 20th century, and I thought that was really good. There's some police brutality that were really good. There was some that were more personal and more romantic, which isn't just my cup of tea with poetry. So I did overall enjoy this. It's just not my new favourite collection, but I think in particular I would recommend perhaps picking up a book of Audrey Lorde's that is a combination of her poems and her non-fiction, because I think side by side they would sit really well and really wonderfully like complement one another, because her essays are phenomenal, and there were certainly some wonderful messages and powerful statements in these poems. I think actually if you enjoy Maya Angelou's poetry, you will get a lot from Audrey Lorde as well. But the next two books I finished were all ebooks, and the first one is The Faceless Women by Emma Hamm. This book is a continuation of the series that Emma Hamm started with The Heart of Fae, but it follows side characters from that duology. So The Heart of Fae is the first of the duology. It's a fantasy novel set in a sort of medieval Ireland. And this book, The Faceless Women, follows Bran and Aisling, who are two characters that you will have come across if you've read those two books. So it is a completely standalone story, but in a way I think the first duology is so wonderful that I'd probably recommend reading those first, because then you will have these little bits of insight into what's gone on before in this world, and perhaps some of the background of at least one of those characters. So they are not the main characters in any way in that first duology though, so this is very much a standalone book in terms of the first in its own series, because there's a sequel coming out. Yeah, so you could very well start here if you prefer the sound of this book, okay? That's what I'm trying to say. I hope it made sense. It's a medieval fantasy book, although this one is set predominantly in the realm of the Fae, and not the Seelie Fae but the Unseelie Fae, which is like the much darker Fae kingdom where the kind of rejected fairies go, the fairies aren't considered as beautiful, or who don't want to follow by the rules, who are a bit cruel and callous or whatever. There's like a wide array of reasons you could be an Unseelie Fae, and they live in this realm. And our two main protagonists are Aisling and Bran, and Aisling is a young witch who is being burnt at the stake by a group of villagers. When Bran comes along, he is a Fae, and she spots him, and in order to save herself casts a binding curse so that whatever happens to her happens to him, so he has to save her so that he doesn't die. So that kind of binds them together because they don't know how to break this curse. So they then both go on this sort of quest to find out how to break the curse in the land of the Unseelie Fae, which is where Bran is from. And it is very much a romance. Like, you're very much following Bran and Aisling's developing relationship, but also the dark, creepy things going on in this book. If you have read Emma Hamm's Heart of Fae, I'd say this book is like a big notch up in the darkness level. It's much darker, like very creepy, very dark things happen, kind of unsettling violent things happen, so like be prepared. And she paints a very vivid picture of this kind of creepy fae world. The dialogue between the three characters that are consistently there, Aisling, Bran, and her cat who can speak, who's also on this adventure with him, like all of their language is not that realistic in terms of how you actually speak to people, because it's all so like witty, tongue-in-cheek, sarcastic. They are always like striking back at one another with words. They've got that like real flirty tension in their words and their insults to one another, because at first they hate each other, and it very much plays into that trope. But I really enjoyed it. I don't expect my books to be like mirrors of the real world, and I thought it delivered exactly what I wanted from the novel itself. But oh my goodness, that ending. Let me tell you how pleased I am to know that the sequel to this book comes out in a few days, because I need to know what happens. Seriously. This happened with the first duology as well. There was a cliffhanger and oh. But I'm ready, and I'm ready for the sequel. Next book I read was Radiance by Grace Draven. This is another book that is the first in a fantasy duology. Don't know if that's just becoming my thing now. And I loved this book so much more than I was expecting to. I couldn't put it down. I read it in 2 days. It is very much a romance book. Like the fantasy and maybe like court intrigue background plot is very, very second to what is essentially a romance novel between two characters that develops over the course of the story, and it was so lovely. It's one of the most lovely romances I've ever read in a book because it was so well done. These are not two characters that meet each other and hate each other and then like eventually learn to love each other, which is fine, but I feel like that's a lot more common in literature. Whereas this was a novel in which an arranged marriage has been set up between a noble woman from like the human kingdom and a prince from the Kai kingdom. So the Kai are a non-human race. They sort of have like human figure, but they have like really sharp pointed teeth. They have like eyes that are all yellow with no pupils or irises. They have like claws, they're stronger, they've got like a little bit of magic in them. So this is a marriage that takes place, and initially when these two people meet they think the other one is the most hideous thing they've ever seen in their lives, because they're of different species and they are not used to appreciating the beauty of these different species between one another, even though they might both be considered beautiful by their own people. However, they get on really well as like friends, so they start off this marriage very much as friends who get on really, really well, and they develop this budding romance and relationship and kind of fall in love with one another gradually whilst they are together, and they become this team, and it's so, so nice. Like, it's just so nice. Like I said, maybe lacking in plot slightly, but some stuff happens at the end of this one that very much sets up for a lot of plot in the sequel, so I'll be intrigued to see how that kind of escalates in book 2, but I'm definitely going to pick that up ASAP because like I said, I just loved the two main characters' romance. It was so lovely that there was really no animosity or negativity even from the beginning. It was just following two people that might not have thought they would fall in love, but they were put in the circumstance that allowed them to fall in love, even if other people hadn't intended for it, so it was just lovely. And lastly, I read a short story that was Waiting on a Bright Moon by J.Y. Yang. This is a Tor novella. It was 40 pages. I think it's more like a short story than a novella. I don't know what they actually term it, but I downloaded this one on my Kindle ages ago, so I think it was like 99p, and it sounded really good, and I ended up enjoying it. So it's 40 pages. There was not a lot to get your teeth stuck into. What it felt like more for me was like a sample of this author's writing, and this author's writing is gorgeous. This author is just like a beautiful, beautiful writer, and that is what I took away from this short story, more so than characters' lives that I got invested in, or like plot that was really tense and enjoyable to follow, because there wasn't much time to get my teeth into anything like that. And from the beginning it can be a little bit confusing because you're kind of flung into this science fiction futuristic world that is setting on like different planets and spaceships, and people fulfill these certain roles in the society, and you just have to like take all for granted from the beginning because there's not a lot of time for world building. So I was a bit confused at the beginning, but as it goes on you very much understand the society and you get to grips with the kind of structure and who our characters are and what roles they fill in the society, but you don't get tons and tons of background, you just get what you need to know. And because of that I didn't like madly fall in love with this short story, but it was intriguing enough to keep me reading, and it was beautifully written, so much so that I'm definitely going to read more by this author. Again, this one was one that featured a queer romance between two women, which was lovely to see. Science fiction, can't really say terribly much about the plot because it's so short, but if you like science fiction, if you like queer romances, if you like beautiful writing, then this is one I would recommend checking out, or just trying one of the author's novels, which I plan on doing next. But those are all the books I read in the first half of the month. Hopefully you have enjoyed listening to me ramble on about them. Let me know if you have any thoughts on these books in the comments down below, and I will see you all again next time. Bye guys!